The NBA trade deadline has come and gone, and it was one of the most crazy trade deadlines that we've really ever seen in the NBA and kind of in sports in general. Stars moving everywhere, so many trades, and the Kings were a big part of that. Moving De'Aaron Fox to the Spurs, bringing in Zach LaVine. But outside of those star moves, the Kings actually made moves around the edges too. And that's a stark contrast to past trade deadlines where the Kings haven't made any moves to fill the holes on the roster, where they've gone out and gotten Kessler Edwards for some cash considerations, and that was their big move. For so long, Kings fans and myself have been asking for the front office to actually look at this roster and see the obvious holes that are in it, and to make moves to fill those holes to actually make sure that this team can be competitive. Because, I mean, what's the point of trying to win if you're not going to make the moves to really take it to the next level? In the past, this front office, they've been the kings of the almost move. And so it was nice to actually see them go out and make some deals for positions of need. The Kings had depth issues. The Kings needed someone on the wing. The Kings needed a backup big. And what did they do? They got a wing. They got a backup big. Look at where the Kings were heading into this trade deadline, the position they were in. It wasn't a great position with the De'Aaron Fox situation, with the lack of depth, with your most tradable contract still being a negative asset in Kevin Huerter, and being in a position where it felt like you needed depth, but any move to get depth, it kind of felt like we were going to have to give up someone. It didn't feel like there was a great path to really improve the depth of this team. And so the front office put itself in this position. The front office put itself in a bad position by wasting assets, just really poor asset management up to this point, by making De'Aaron Fox want to leave this team. But looking strictly at this trade deadline, I think they did a pretty good job. Like a B plus is probably what I would give them in a grade for this trade deadline. That doesn't mean everything's just okay, because you can't ignore what the front office has done in the past, but they've kind of given themselves a chance here. And so you look at the Kings roster now. Starting lineup: Malik Monk, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Keegan Murray, Domantas Sabonis. Is that the best fitting starting lineup? No, it isn't, but it is a very talented one. And then off the bench, Keon Ellis and Devin Carter are your guards. You have Jake LaRavia, you have Trey Lyles, you have Jonas Valanciunas, and you have Isaac Jones. So those are 6 guys that you're like, okay, they could play, some more than others. I don't expect Devin Carter or even really Isaac Jones to have big roles, but that is a massive improvement. When earlier in the season, the Kings were running 8-man rotations and Alex Len was the 8th guy in the rotation, that just wasn't going to work at all for a team that had aspirations to make the playoffs. And so at this trade deadline, did the Kings get a whole lot better? Probably not. Did they get a whole lot worse? Probably not. I don't know if this team's going to be better than it was. I think it probably will, because of the depth that they added. There are questions about this starting lineup, and I do think that you probably want to start a more defensive player, maybe over DeMar DeRozan, Keon Ellis, or even at this point, Jake LaRavia. But the Kings are kind of locked in right now. They're locked into their core. For this season and 2 more seasons, barring trades, you're locked in. You're locked into Monk, LaVine, DeRozan, Sabonis. Those are your 4 guys you're locked into. And so I think that the front office actually did a good job of being able to add pieces without having to give pieces up in return. The guys that you had to trade in, Kevin Huerter, Alex Len, Colby Jones, those were not guys that were making an impact in the rotation. And so being able to bring in Jonas Valanciunas and Jake LaRavia without giving up a Trey Lyles, I mean, that's a big deal. And so let's look at what came in and what came out for the Kings. Out goes Fox, Huerter, McLaughlin, Alex Len, Colby Jones, and 3 second-round picks. Coming in, Zach LaVine, Jake LaRavia, Jonas Valanciunas, 3 first-round picks and 3 second-round picks. The Charlotte first-round pick will be 2 second-round picks, almost guaranteed. I was definitely getting worried as the trade deadline approached that the Kings weren't going to make a move for the wing, because I think Zach LaVine and Jonas Valanciunas are both guys that can add a lot to this team. And it didn't start out super well for Zach LaVine in the first game. He'll get better. It's fine. Jonas Valanciunas, really solid guy to come off the bench, and we're going to see him tonight in Portland. But this team still just had only one wing that could play any defense. So bringing in Jake LaRavia happened right at the trade deadline. That's a big deal because Jake LaRavia is a very good player, listed 6'7", 6'8". And this is a guy who was a rotational player for the Grizzlies. Played about 20 minutes a night. Shot 44.4% from three this season. Is a 37% three-point shooter on his career. He's only taking about 2 attempts per game this season. So not the most volume, but still solid shooter. And he's coming in as a guy with that size, with length, that's a solid defender and a hustle player. And that's exactly what the Kings need, because I've talked about it before, how sometimes it feels like the Kings just don't have the guys that are going to get on the floor and go get a ball. Jake LaRavia is very good at going and getting loose balls. He's very good at getting deflections. He's someone who's going to run the floor. He doesn't look like the most athletic guy, and he's not the most athletic guy. And so I think some people will undervalue what he brings on the defensive side of the ball. I've seen Kings fans say this is, a Kevin Huerter replacement, which, yeah, it kind of is, but he's a better fit than Kevin Huerter because he's a better defender. And playing defense on the Grizzlies is definitely different than playing defense on the Kings. On the Kings, your holes in your defensive game are going to be exposed, no doubt. But LaRavia is definitely a better defensive player. And then I've seen people compare it to the Kessler Edwards move. But the reason it's not the Kessler Edwards move is because Jake LaRavia is actually a guy that's proven that he can be a solid rotational player. This is not some flyer. I mean, it kind of is some flyer we're taking out on a guy, but it's a more proven guy. It's a guy that's been playing well for the Grizzlies that we actually had to give up an asset to get, even though it was still cheap in 1 second-round pick, plus Alex Len and Colby Jones. And that happened because the Grizzlies declined his option, and then he came out and he's been playing well, and so they don't think that they are going to be able to re-sign him. They've been trying to just get their financial books right, so that's why they're trading him here. And the Kings, in terms of re-signing him, are in a weird spot because his option got declined, so they can only offer him a little over $5 million. And so it's a question whether we're going to be able to re-sign him or not, but we might be able to. And I think that's a good chance to take with a second-round pick, because even if we don't re-sign him because he plays so well, that would mean he probably plays pretty well, so he plays over what we can offer him, and that means he's adding something for this season. He just adds what the Kings need. Having just a wing with some size is a godsend. He's not taking away anyone in the rotation that we were playing anyways. Alex Len, Colby Jones. And we've also now, in this trade deadline, opened up 3 roster spots. And so that's interesting. Having 3 open roster spots, we don't have a lot of money to play with under the luxury tax, and we're definitely going to stay under the luxury tax. So one of those roster spots will almost certainly be used on Isaac Jones. I assume they'll let him play out a few more games on his 2-way contract, and then whenever he can't play anymore on that contract, they'll probably sign him. And then I bet they'll sign one guy in the buyout market in free agency, something like that. I bet they'll leave a roster spot open just because they don't want to go over the luxury tax. And I think it would be hard to stay under with signing 3 players. And so I think so there's one roster spot that's interesting. And I think that's where you go out and you get a point guard. Because I think relying on Keon Ellis and Devin Carter to be the guys handling the ball off the bench isn't great. I don't think you really want Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan to be your full-time ball handlers with those bench units. And that's not to say it won't happen. We will have those guys be ball handlers, but it would just be nice to have a backup option. I'm not exactly sure who's available right now. I don't know who's going to get bought out. Maybe a Reggie Jackson, a Markelle Fultz, who never got signed this season. It's a very, very fluid situation with the buyout market. We'll see, but I think a point guard would be a good add. Overall, I just think this trade deadline was a massive win. Or maybe not massive. You lost De'Aaron Fox, but Zach LaVine's a great player. Is his contract great? No. But he's still a great player. LaRavia gives you that other wing option. Jonas Valanciunas finally gives you some size, some grit, someone who's going to punch someone in the face, someone who may break a player's wrist by throwing them down, as Chimezie Metu knows. Don't love that aspect of it, I've always, whenever I see Jonas Valanciunas, I think about him breaking Metu's wrist. It's not great, but got to move past that, I guess. But I think the Kings just gained more versatility, more options with lineups that they can put out. Having more shooters is great. You have 4 guys that are actually going to be in the rotation that are shooting over 40% from 3 in Zach LaVine, Jake LaRavia, Keon Ellis, and Domantas Sabonis. All of a sudden, the bench is looking a lot better. You know, I was a big Alex Len guy. I loved Alex Len being here. He was actually the longest tenured player here for a few days after Fox got dealt. But now that he's gone, it is Domantas Sabonis by about 2 days over Trey Lyles. But shout out to Alex Len. He was a fun guy to have around. Colby Jones, he just didn't really work out. Like, he's a great G League player. Was shooting about 36% from 3 in the G League this year, so he was improving there, but it just seemed like he didn't quite have the feel for the game that we had hoped he would have had. And so pretty much the front office put this team in a position where they can fight for a playoff spot this season. What is the long-term outlook of this team? I'm not sure, but we'll get to that when it comes to it. Right now for this season, we got a talented team that I think can make a playoff push here. So I'm excited. Let me know what you guys think of the new additions to this team. But for now, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. Like always, I'll be back here to recap every single Kings game. So I will see you guys then. Peace.